World sees villain, India sees completely different Putin. The UK and Norway to build a joint fleet to track Russian submarines. Ukraine wipes out over 1,100 Russian invaders in just 24 hours. Stay tuned for frontline updates. Russian President Vladimir Putin is beginning his two-day visit to India today. This is his first visit to India in 4 years. The talks between the two leaders, Putin and Modi, are expected to focus on boosting defense ties, insulating bilateral trade from external pressure, and exploring cooperation in small modular reactors. Before that, India Today channel made an exclusive interview with him, noting that while many around the world portray Putin as a villain, he appeared completely different when stating that he will continue the war in Ukraine. We will share with you key takeaways. He said Russia will, in any case, liberate Donbas and so-called Novorossiya, either militarily or by other means. Second one, Russia disagreed with several points of the U.S. peace proposals for Ukraine, but called it complicated work. Russia does not intend to return to the G8 format. The G7's share of the global economy is shrinking every year like a shagreen skin, he said. The meeting with Witkoff and Kushner was very useful. Russia allegedly proposed that Ukraine withdraw troops from Donbas and avoid military actions, but Kyiv prefers war, he stated, and that Europeans need to get involved in the work on the Ukrainian settlement, not hinder it. Kyiv is gearing up for another round of talks in the United States after the American delegation returned from Moscow. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced the move. Communication with officials from Donald Trump's administration is active and ongoing. The latest discussions in Geneva and Florida made one thing clear. Ukraine's voice is being heard, he noted.
We are preparing meetings in the United States. After the American team returned from Moscow and held the relevant consultations in Washington, Rustem Umerov, Andrii Sybiha, and everyone needed for the negotiations will continue their dialogue with representatives of President Trump. We expect updates in the coming days regarding these meetings, contacts, and negotiations, whether in-person meetings or phone conversations. There is constant communication among all partners and between the partners and Ukraine. Everything is moving quite productively right now. At the meetings in Geneva and Florida, Ukraine was heard and Ukraine's position was taken into account. And this is important. We expect this to continue. Only with consideration of Ukraine's interests is a dignified peace possible.
Another round of talks between Kyiv and Washington is set for today in Miami. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner meet with Ukraine's lead negotiator, Rustem Umerov, to continue discussions on the so-called Trump peace plan. Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Olha Stefanishyna, shared the update while speaking to reporters in the U.S. Senate. Progress so far has been limited, she says, but the negotiations are moving forward. Sergei Koslitsya, Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, expressed his deep respect for Marco Rubio, not only in his capacity as the top figure in U.S. diplomacy, but also as a statesman with broad experience, something reflected in the way he speaks. He noted that he especially values Rubio's position that the responsibility for ending this war of aggression lies solely with one person in Russia, not with his advisors.
Question was, do you, and how confident are you? Last question. Secretary Rubio said, it's hard to tell about confidence level on it, because ultimately the decisions have to be made, in the case of Russia, by Putin alone, not his advisors. Only Putin can end this war on the Russian side. From the Sergei Koslitsaya's post on X social network.
Ukraine and Russia had the opportunity to reach a peace agreement earlier, but did not take it, U.S. President Donald Trump said at a briefing at the White House. He emphasized that he considers the war a tragedy that could have been avoided. Trump also commented on the meeting between Witkoff and Putin in Moscow. Ukraine is counting on the U.S. Congress to pass legislation that would toughen sanctions on Russia and formally designate it as a state sponsor of terrorism, Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Olha Stefanishyna, said. She highlighted that Ukraine continues to enjoy solid bipartisan backing in both the Senate and the House. Stefanishina also noted that Kyiv is actively working with American lawmakers to push forward the Graham-Blumenthal sanctions bill, designed to ramp up pressure on Russia's dictator. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andrii Sybiha highlighted the key outcomes of the recent international meeting, stressing the unprecedented level of allied support and the crystal-clear decisions made in favor of Ukraine's defense. Here are his exact words.
That's roughly $1 billion in additional funding from our allies to support our army through the Pearl program. For me, as Ukraine's foreign minister, a country that's at war, it was really important to feel that unity and rock-solid determination to keep backing us, especially right now. The discussion was super concrete. Every single speaker brought up specific things that need to get done.
The UK and Norway are gearing up to sign a historic defense pact that includes setting up a joint naval force. The main goal is to track Russian submarines in the North Atlantic and protect critical underwater infrastructure, according to The Independent. The deal is being called the Lunna House Agreement, named after the Lunna House base on the Shetland Islands that the Norwegian resistance used as a secret hub during World War II. What is worth noting is that the British Ministry of Defence says Russian naval activity in waters around the UK has jumped 30% over the past 2 years. Over the past 24 hours, the armed forces of Ukraine have eliminated 1,140 Russian occupiers. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, losses of the Russian army since the start of the full-scale war have exceeded 1,177,000 personnel. In addition, Ukrainian forces destroyed 3 Russian tanks, 3 armored combat vehicles, 29 artillery systems, 1 multiple rocket launcher system, and 125 units of enemy vehicles and special equipment yesterday. In the world of cybersecurity and national security, a growing alarm is sounding over Russia's misuse of stolen Ukrainian IP addresses. Recent reports reveal that state-backed actors are hijacking IP blocks from Ukrainian providers to mask cyber attacks and run disinformation campaigns. These addresses work like digital passports. They hide the real origin of the attacks, while letting Russia carry out illegal activities in occupied territories or in parts of the internet where governance is already fragile. What we're seeing is a dangerous overlap between IP address management, computer security, and international sanctions.
Stolen IP addresses aren't just a technical resource. They're a strategic weapon that can destabilize critical networks and make it insanely hard to pin attacks on the real culprits. At the international level, close cooperation between regulators, providers, and international bodies is the only way to shut down these loopholes and hold the people exploiting these addresses accountable. Oleksandr Fedienko, cybersecurity expert, entrepreneur, public figure, and Ukrainian politician, in a comment to Ukrinform.
Measures are being discussed to revoke or block these stolen IP addresses, along with potential regulatory tweaks to stop them from falling into the hands of bad actors who use them for illegal purposes. This whole issue sits right at the crossroads of cybersecurity, international law, and sanctions policy, with a clear call for much tighter coordination between regulators, connectivity providers, and national authorities.
The fight against the misuse of stolen IP addresses requires a multi-sectoral approach, strengthening detection capabilities, enhancing international cooperation, and ensuring that regulations are enforced decisively to prevent these addresses from continuing to be a resource for operations that threaten regional stability. Andrii Pilipenko, Ukrainian attorney at law, in a comment to Ukrinform.
Russian troops are getting bogged down in street fighting in Pokrovsk, according to fighters from the 7th Corps of Ukraine's air assault forces. The enemy is trying to ramp up propaganda and disinformation, spreading false claims that the city has been captured. Meanwhile, the situation on the ground remains tense. The invaders are actively assaulting the northern part of Pokrovsk, while Ukrainian forces continue their defensive operations and work to expand the city's logistics corridor. Despite heavy fighting, Ukrainian defense forces in the Mirnorad area have successfully rotated several units. Russia is supposedly making a comeback in global politics. Throughout 2025, Kremlin propaganda has been trying to convince people across the entire country of this narrative. To prove it, They highlighted and spun foreign trips of the world's most notorious international criminal, Putin. The message: he visited China and India, and why not count Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan as foreign trips? He even made a rare visit to the United States for the first time in 10 years. Of course, propaganda conveniently omitted the questionable success of that visit, including a canceled lunch between delegations. Equally absent from Kremlin narratives are the trips that never happened, often because of the Russian dictator's panic over the possibility of ending up in the dock at The Hague. For example, he skipped the G20 summit in South Africa and a meeting with his BRICS allies in Brazil. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has signed the 2026 budget, allocating record funds to the war against Ukraine, while sharply cutting social programs for Russian citizens. Nearly one-third of all spending, a level not seen since the Soviet era, is going to military needs. Almost 13 trillion rubles for the army and weapons procurement. Another nearly 4 trillion rubles are earmarked for so-called national security, covering the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the National Guard, intelligence services, and the Federal Penitentiary Service. In total, Russia's security forces will receive over 16.5 trillion rubles, almost 40% of the entire federal budget. The budget also reflects a massive deficit of 1.6% of GDP, driven by a collapse in oil and gas revenues caused by sanctions and Ukraine's long-range strikes. To fill the gap, the Russian authorities have decided to cut social programs, reducing their share of spending to just 25%, the lowest level in the past 20 years. Ukrainian defense forces have turned the situation near Kupiansk, pushing the Russian occupation army back to the northern outskirts of the city and establishing a kill zone around the settlement, according to Viktor Trehubov, head of the communications department of the Joint Forces Group. Despite Putin's propaganda claims that his army has captured Kupiansk, the situation for Russian forces in this sector of the front is worsening. Supply lines for the Kremlin's occupying army have been cut, and they are effectively unable to bring in reinforcements. Thanks for watching News Digest. Stay informed, stay curious, and don't forget to subscribe. Hit the bell and leave your comments. Your voice matters. See you tomorrow with more updates from Ukraine and around the world.